This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Zehr. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Coffee with Kenobi. This is your spoiler-free place for Star Wars community and conversation. I'm your host, Dan Zehr, thrilled to be talking Star Wars with each and every one of you. You can support Coffee with Kenobi by following the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok, and subscribing to the YouTube channel. Help spread the word by tweeting that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. Coffee with Kenobi is a proud member of the Spreaker Prime program. I want to thank our official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi, MEI and Mousefan Travel. If you are interested in a no-cost, no-obligation quote for your next vacation, check out coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel and let them know Coffee with Kenobi and Dan Zehr sent you. Thank you also to members of the CWK Alliance. Find out how you can join the Alliance for as little as $1 a month and get access to exclusive podcasts, videos, and much more at coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance. On today's show, Tom Gross and Smooth Rivera join me to break down all of the amazing events, experiences, and themes in Part 5 of the Disney Plus series, Obi-Wan Kenobi. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi. Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about Part 5 of Disney Plus's Obi-Wan Kenobi are two guests to the program. Now, one is a gnome. He's not a gnome. He is a guest and a good friend of ours. You know him, you love him, Mr. Tom Gross.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. Woo-wee! Episode 5, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Woo-wee, indeed.
Today deserves
you must have watched a different episode. And we're going to have a lot to talk about, and as we always do, we haven't talked about it or shared any thoughts together, so this is going to be completely fresh, authentic, and organic. Yes. Completely. Speaking of fresh, how about Smooth? How about for his first time on Coffee with Kenobi? He has been on CWK Pour-Over. He was a CWK Alliance Spotlight member. I think it was a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year ago. Yeah, it was right before our Summer Treats episode, I believe. We have Mr. Smooth Rivera. Smooth, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi.
Wow. Thank you, guys. I appreciate the invite. It's always just a pleasure to chat with you guys. It's really fun.
It is going to be great. We loved getting to meet you and hang out with you and your wife at Star Wars Celebration about a month ago, and happy to have you on the show, my friend. This is quite an episode to talk about. It is the penultimate episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Penultimate meaning the second to last one. So, Tom, we'll start with you. Letter grade and overall reactions.
Oh, yes. This episode gets an A+ from me. I absolutely love this episode. It was full of tension, adventure, shootouts, lightsaber battles, heartbreak. I mean, you name it, it's there. This, minus the disclaimer at the opening and the 2022 violence, this is as Star Wars as it gets. I mean, this was just a wonderful episode. I've been looking forward to talking about this for quite a while. I even wrote down notes on this one because there are certain things I did not want to miss.
Oh, great. Smooth, what about you? Letter grade and overall reactions.
Yeah, incredible. I totally agree. As you look at the series overall, you know that something special is going to happen in these last two episodes. Only 6 episodes in this whole story arc. You can't imagine it wrapping up in such a short time. But man, this is just filled to the brim with everything Tom said: tension, action, drama. A+ all the way. I was loving it. Mostly loving it. I mean, there are parts that are pretty tough, but just awesome all around.
This is absolutely 100% an A+. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind. This is one of the, every week, is it the best episode of the series? I don't know. They're all fantastic, and they all build beautifully. I think the directing, I think the acting, I think the scripts, I think the effects, I think the tension I felt throughout this entire episode was unlike most things I watch in Star Wars. I mean, you get some tense moments or some tension, but this whole time it was so pulse pounding. And you mentioned the opening. We'll talk about that in a second, but top to bottom overall, this was like a time capsule. And I'll take it a step further. This to me was not the Star Wars of my youth. This is Star Wars maturing. This is Star Wars taking another step. And to me, a very positive direction. I did watch it with Mason, as we always do. In fact, let's just talk about the opening. Tom, you talked about the opening. There was a warning at the beginning, and then we had a pretty jaw-dropping visual that was kind of sprinkled throughout the episode, which is very important thematically to what's going on. But talk about that opening warning, your thoughts on that, and just seeing what we saw at the beginning. And I want to hear from both of you on this.
Let me ask you real quick. Has that opening been on every episode thus far?
No, this is the first one.
Because I'm pretty sure I went back. I went back to watch the beginning of episode 1 really quickly, and I noticed it was there. And I was like, I don't think that was
maybe they just added them
before.
It's never been live in an episode.
No, I hadn't seen it.
I don't know, but
I have a theory about why that might be.
So, okay. So, seeing that, I was like, okay, so we need to brace ourselves for maybe something extra, something unusual, which I don't know. I don't know that I saw anything that was jaw-dropping, like, ooh, that's really disturbing, that I haven't already seen. But nonetheless, what I really want to get to is that opening, that flashback. They start with the image of Coruscant, and you're like, whoa, this is not where we haven't been here in this Obi-Wan series. And then you realize this is a flashback. Now, through my notes, I noted these as they were inserted throughout the episode. I noted them as interludes, taking from Chuck Wendig's Aftermath series. But I included them as interludes because of their impact at that moment throughout the entire episode. So I really liked the way that this was brought in. First of all, how nice to see, like, finally be able to see Hayden Christensen without heavy burn makeup or a helmet going on or something like that. It was great to, like, I was like, oh, that's great. I really enjoy that. But the conflict that you could see in both of their faces, as, I mean, obviously this was a setup to be a test, whatnot, but you could see that there was a certain level of tension that I think established something throughout the entire episode. And then I'm going to stop with saying this, when it snaps out of that episode right to Vader's face, just, whew, man, it was like stepping off of a short, when you miss the last step on a set of stairs and you have that, like, that jump that makes your heart pop. It was like that. It was like, whoa, that I was not preparing for Vader. I was thinking that was going to be an Obi-Wan flashback, and it's actually an Anakin. Well, Vader. Anakin. I go back to I said this last time I was on, I go back to that interview you had with Hayden Christensen where you asked, is this an Anakin story or a Vader story? And he said Anakin. And I was like, never seen Vader as that. I'm totally seeing it now.
Yes. Well, I'll hold my reactions. Go ahead, Smooth.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. It was, I mean, each episode has had so many surprises in so many good ways. I mean, starting with the first one with young Leia, I don't know why, I just never thought to see her in the whole series, and it's just been fantastic the whole time. And this one, just fantastic. Opening up, as soon as you see, the Jedi Temple setting, you're like, oh my goodness, this is going to be, this is a flashback, and you see them, the two of them interact. It's something. You just, being a longtime Star Wars fan, you just never would have imagined happening, and so it's just so cool to see them interact, and then to see that it's Vader kind of flashing back to that. I think that, at least through the episode, really helped to just get inside his head and see that he is just more than this machine. Still, he still is Anakin inside there, and he still has that turmoil, those roiling emotions, and it was amazing and powerful, and to see both of them go at it again like their old selves was pretty special.
When we see and I agree with you. I agree with both of you. When it starts and we see that caveat, that warning, it rang particularly true to me because the night before I'm a bit behind because of celebration and lots of things going on. Good positive things going on, but just I've been very busy. My pop culture consumption. People are always saying, "Hey, you're watching the show? You watching the show?" I'm like, "Well, I do what I can, but I run a podcast that takes up a lot of my time. A lot of my pop culture consumption is the Star Wars thing, and I'm not complaining about that. But the day before I watched this episode, I watched the first episode of season 4 of Stranger Things.
Yes.
And I'm not sure where you all are. I'm not going to spoil anything. I've only watched a couple episodes so far in the 4th season, but there's a warning at the beginning about some disturbing images and violence against children. So as a teacher and as a father, it's hard not to think about the real world and horrific violence that happens in schools. Sorry, I'm not being political. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
Hard not to think about that as a teacher and a dad because it affects me in 2 different ways. And so I'm very cognizant of that. So when it flashes, I paused it and I said to Mason, "What do you think, buddy?" Because I want him, he just turned 9. I want him to have a little bit of agency. He's seen the Star Wars stuff. He's seen the Marvel stuff, But we're a very peaceful family, obviously. And he said, and he looked at me. He's like, "Well, I mean, what do you think it will be?" He goes, "It's just pretend, Dad." And I said, "You're right. It is just pretend. You're right." And so why don't we? I said, "Do you feel comfortable?" He goes, "Yeah, I want to watch it." I said, "Okay. If something is yucky or doesn't feel right, then we'll just pause and talk about it, or I'll just screen it and we'll see." He said, "Okay." But he goes, "But I think it will be fine." And it was fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't, but it was because the sequence that happens is, of course, the big reveal with Reva, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And I just feel like that, this is an old concept. I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but when the original Frankenstein with Boris Karloff originally was in movie theaters, in the 30s, 40s, there was a warning by the director. I think it was a director, or maybe it was just an actor. And he says, "What you're going to see is really disturbing. We want to warn you." Now, for our modern audiences, it's not disturbing, but for that time period, it was shocking. It was very shocking. So this is like a classic way to kind of give you a heads up. And I appreciate that they did. But I also think it contributed to the tension of the episode. Good, bad, or indifferent. It was just the organic nature of things. When I saw Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker, and I saw Ewan McGregor as a younger Obi-Wan Kenobi, I mean, I cheered. Tracy Canobio, Lucasfilm's one of Lucasfilm's longtime PR people, and a wonderful person. She had tweeted that she loves this episode so much before anyone had seen it, and I know her enough to know that how much she loves Anakin, how much she loves Hayden Christensen, how much she loves Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I thought, okay, something cool is going to happen, and it did. Again, as you mentioned, Tom, it was like an interlude is a wonderful way to describe it. It happens throughout the episode, but seeing it play out the way that did and realizing this is a training session, but there's a little more to it. There's a little more behind it. How many things like this have actually happened? I thought it was wonderful. It really sets the tone. You're going to go on a bit of an emotional roller coaster. And I think we certainly did. I don't have, like we've been doing for this series, it's actually been kind of refreshing for me to review it. And hopefully people listening have been enjoying it as well. We don't have top 5s for the main Coffee with Kenobi breakdowns of these episodes. I'm not going down beat by beat. I want to talk about themes and ideas throughout this episode. And I've certainly got a list. I mean, I think we need to talk about the ending. I think we need to talk about the reveal of Reva. I think we need to talk about what happens with Tala. I think we need to talk about growth of Obi-Wan Kenobi and what we learned about Darth Vader. Those are the big things I want to talk about. And I would kind of like to take them in some sort of an order. But Tom, you mentioned that you wrote some things down. So anything kind of in the beginning, first 10, 15 minutes of the episode that kind of jumped out that you want to hit on?
Okay. Well, yeah. So the thing that really struck me and this is actually right before one of the interludes. So when Obi-Wan and Leia are in the docking bay or the hideout of the refugees, and they realize that they've been sabotaged, they're locked in, there's a Star Destroyer out there, and the one guy who's sort of leading the transports says, Kenobi says,
Colin Roken is his name, Kawlan, and then last name Roken, played by the son of the actor Ice Cube.
Oh, right. Okay.
Nice. Yeah.
And he's
Excellent.
great. I love him.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Love him.
I enjoyed him as well. So Colin he's discussing with Obi-Wan how to handle this. And without going over the whole thing, at one point, Colin turns to Obi-Wan and says, "How do you know? How do you know that's what we should do?"
Yeah.
And, Kenobi just knows this. And then they click to that interlude, and it's the one where Anakin backs him into that level, and Obi-Wan pushes him away. And he says, "Anakin, you're being so aggressive. Be mindful." Sorry, that was terrible, but yeah.
I loved it.
That was
trying to set up
great.
the dialogue. And Anakin, his line that really resonated with me was, "Mercy doesn't defeat an enemy." Right there is how you know that Kenobi knows what's going to happen here, and he sees it coming. And what it sets up for me in this whole episode is that we're getting a different sort of, 2 episodes ago, Vader dominated Kenobi with a lightsaber battle. This is going to be a different sort of battle, but it's not going to have anything to do, well, at least between Vader and Kenobi, it's not going to have anything to do with lightsabers, which I love that sort of juxtaposition at this point. We're seeing Kenobi come back to the light, come back to the Force. And while he is not powerful with the saber, he's coming back into the Force. He goes to what he knows, and that is his mind, his history with Anakin, and his cunning. And he realizes in this moment, I feel like it's in this area. I don't know if it's this moment, but he realizes I used to best Anakin through my mind and my cunning, and not necessarily through power. Because through every one of these interludes, Anakin is definitely more powerful with the saber, and I suppose in a way the Force. But the way Obi-Wan defeats Anakin every time is with his mind, and trying to get him to be more mindful. But he knows without that master, he doesn't have that mindfulness. And so I feel like I was like, I think Obi-Wan's going to be a step ahead in this episode. It never really felt that way, but in my mind, I said, there's purpose for all of this.
Yes, and it's great storytelling. Smooth, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that you just definitely see the progression that Kenobi has had over the last several episodes. At the end of episode 4, where he's getting back in touch with the Force, you see him also in this episode start to take back control of that confidence and that leadership, and that, like you said, that mindfulness of what's around him, of what he knows, of what resources he has at his disposal, and how to use them best, just like he did in the Clone Wars days, when he would throw himself in situations just himself and he'd be able to get out of them. Right when in those first opening sequences, he really takes charge. He takes a leadership role as far as what to do and how to best serve the people, along with, Colin, to help get the people out of there. But yeah, I thought that was really cool to see Obi-Wan's growth in that way. And then, like you said, to start to use his, like you said, cunning, I think his intelligence, his wisdom to really know his enemy, which is also his brother, and he knows how he's going to think. And because of that, he knows how he can, best address the situation.
Yes, Obi-Wan is not... He's getting closer. He's closer here than he was at the beginning of part 1.
Right.
He's still not making wisecracks, which I've maintained that's when we'll know he's fully in his skin. And I really still firmly believe that. I think that's a character thing. but he talks a lot more in this episode. He's much more vocal and assertive, not in an aggressive way, but in a leadership role. And I'm glad you brought that up, Tom, about Leia. Do you trust me? I trust her. Brilliant. Establishes a connection, helps to empower Leia to be herself. And I really like that so much. I like the natural hesitation that Colin has, which makes nothing but complete sense.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to sacrifice all of his people, and he shouldn't want to, but that's not what Obi-Wan has in mind. We do see that Vader has a plan. We're going to box him in, and I don't remember Reva's exact line, because Reva, we haven't mentioned, Reva does become anointed the Grand Inquisitor, which you just kind of feel like, okay, something's off here, but okay, she's a Grand Inquisitor. Vader's like, okay, Neil, here's your badge. I thought it was funny they had a badge that they pop on there that she's like, I don't know, is that the gift shop? Pretty great. But they're going to sell those at Celebration. Everyone will love them, and they should.
Yeah.
But he said, and I don't remember Vader's line. Is like, I don't want to. What is he say? I don't want to stress. I don't want to pin them in. I want to pin him in. What do they say exactly? Usually I write these things down, but I didn't write it down.
I didn't write it down either, but it's...
You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
He says, I'm trying to make him feel pressure, not anybody else. I don't worry about anybody else. I'm worried about him. I want him to feel the anxiety. I want him to feel the stress.
Right.
And, it works, but it doesn't work. It really doesn't. Gosh. So the Imperial blockade, not blockade, but the bombardment happens. So are there any other key moments before we get to Reva showing up at the base that you want to address?
There was, and I don't know if you wanted to discuss that later. You said Tala, because there is a really important conversation between Obi-Wan and Tala as they're kind of preparing for the baddies to kind of come in. And I think that was really important to get, this character's background, to kind of flesh her out more, since she was so important, and especially last episode, and to kind of see where it all came from, how she got to the status that she was with the Empire, and what it was that made her turn, and to know that she sees her role in enabling the Empire before she kind of casted our said, well, I just didn't know what they were going to do with these people. I was hoping to round them up. I didn't know what they were going to do. But when she finally did realize it, she had enough, and then she's trying to make atonement. I loved how she had like the notches in her belt for all the ones that she saved. And she's like, and I wrote the line down because I thought it was really impactful, because Obi-Wan had said there's some things you can't forget. Like, I think it was last episode. And then she brought it back full circle. She said, yes, some things you can't forget, but you can fight to make them better. And I was like, you can tell that's what kind of drove her as far as her purpose was now. But then I think you can see that, seeping into Obi-Wan and how he's now, taking on that role as well.
I think there's a ton of great mental health advice whenever Tala talks. There's a ton of great real world application to this sort of a thing. A lot of people mire and marinate in their pain in real life, and just that's where they are, and that's how they consciously or subconsciously define themselves. And she's saying, no, that's not what we are going to do. That's not what I am going to do. And I think she inspires him. She definitely inspires Leia too. She's very important to this series and to Obi-Wan's development, which is nice to see. One thing I do want to throw in about when we see the flashbacks of Obi-Wan and Anakin dueling, just the fact that we get to say that out loud is a wonderful testament to how great this series is, by the way. But time-wise, this is not Revenge of the Sith Anakin Skywalker. This is impetuous, angry, abrasive, aggressive, because he's got his Padawan braid, right? And he's got the shorter haircut. I just think that's important to mention, because there's a part of you that thinks, there's a part of me when I'm watching that thinks, well, why didn't they seriously take a step back and consider not training him? Because he's clearly very aggressive. There's a couple of thoughts on this. One, they're already so far into his training. He's clearly done a lot of heroic things, or will. He does more after episode 2, really, to be fair. but there's an interesting little thing that happens there with him. And for all we know, maybe other Jedi show this kind of aggressiveness or this frustration. I mean, you'd think it'd be hard not to duel and, constantly be bested by your mentor and not get a little frustrated at times and still have that warrior mentality. And he does have to have a warrior mentality because the Clone Wars are going to be a thing. But this is, again, before Clone Wars, before real fighting. So it's kind of challenging, kind of tricky but it also could be an example of why they're still letting him train in the first place. If these are the kind of warning, like, in the profession, we would call this a red flag, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I just feel like, Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan has kind of been with him, has been with him for so long.
Right.
And if we're talking about the time period where it's the interlude fights, I think Obi-Wan recognizes it, but also out of duty to Qui-Gon Jinn, but also learning who Anakin is. I don't know that it resonates that way with Obi-Wan. He sees it just as, I feel like he sees it as that's just who Anakin is.
Yep.
And and he takes responsibility on himself to say, I'm his master. I need to harness this, continue to teach him, because even though he addresses the aggressiveness, he gives him the correction. You need to be more mindful. You need to this and that. Now, he doesn't really address that showing mercy isn't how you defeat an enemy. I mean, that's a pretty strong statement. Yeah. But again, I wonder if Obi-Wan is just used to hearing Anakin say that he doesn't think much about it.
Because he is 19, theoretically, even though he doesn't look 19 in this part. I mean, it's... but that's okay. I mean,
that is okay.
If I get to see Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker, they could tell me he's a toddler. It's great. I love it. I will take every morsel of it and be very happy and very satisfied. He's a wonderful actor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear you. I think as an outsider, we know that it's a red flag. We can see it's a red flag. But thinking of it from Obi-Wan's point of view, this is his, not just a Padawan. This is somebody, like, he calls him his brother so many times. And you think of in our own lives, how many times do we not truly see warning signs that might be there in our own loved ones because we kind of gloss over them, or we, whether it's good or bad, we hope that they can overcome them with some assistance, and so I don't necessarily see that as like, oh, well, it was, obvious, everybody should have known. I think it's more of, this is just the kind of a side effect of love, where you kind of hold that tension of, this person may not have, maybe having some wrong ideology, but maybe we can help correct that by influence, by example, and maybe they'll grow out of it. But, and I think for Anakin, it's not as much, at least at this point, like anger. It's just passion, and unfortunately, that passion is what gets manipulated by the wrong side.
There isn't a father alive or a coach alive that has not played a sport with their child, especially if there's someone in their teens. You're gonna see that bravado is gonna come out. Doesn't matter who the sport is or whether it's your daughter or your son. Doesn't really matter. You're going to see, if they're competitive, you're going to see that, right? So there's also that part of it's like, well, this is kind of a realistic approach at, learning to kind of be who you are, learning to be in control of your power, of your strength, of your talents, of your abilities. It was really great. It was head scratching, but also great, and I love every aspect of that. So speaking of that, we talked about Reva. She's the new Grand Inquisitor. She shows up, and Obi-Wan says, because there's this beautiful scene, guys, where he's going through and looking at sort of things that they have from people who have passed on. There's this big trunk full of old lightsaber hills, and I haven't paused it to stare at all of them or what have you, but maybe some of them are recognizable. I'm not entirely sure, but it doesn't matter. As I talked about in a previous Coffee with Kenobi, the reason Obi-Wan says your lightsaber is your life is because that kyber crystal in there that you pick right? That you select. It's very personal, very intimate. It is a way to center you in battle in the Force, or when you're using your lightsaber, that helps to calm you through the Force. So it's like a part of them is, even though it's a weapon, it's not a weapon. It's a way for them to meditate in the Force as well. It's very spiritual, and Obi-Wan would know that as well as any Jedi ever would have. So I feel like there was a really nice emotional moment there with him looking at those different hilts. But and he gives up all of his weapons. He gives up his blaster, his communicator, and his lightsaber. And I looked at Mason and I said, well, if I had a list of things I didn't expect in Obi-Wan Kenobi, this will be at the top. Him going to face Vader without any weapons. But Obi-Wan Kenobi says to everyone watching and everyone in the story itself, and we mentioned this, there are some battles you don't use weapons for. And he was right. And then we keep getting those flashbacks again. Tom, you've already covered this really, really well. But I just think it's great because it does play in to this Reva thing. So let's talk about the Reva thing. Let's talk about her conversation with Obi-Wan Kenobi and what we learn about Reva and her backstory.
Yeah, how surprising to get a flashback even further back, with her, as far as, I guess it wouldn't be further back for Anakin, but for her, I mean, just to see her backstory and just the tragedy that she's experienced, and you can kind of see where that anger comes from, where that, it comes from her deep sense of betrayal, deep sense of loss. And, I was thinking back to the last episode 4, where she's talking with young Leia, and she's like, no one's going to save you but you. We know where that comes from now, that hopelessness, and so how horrible to be. And she even says that she thought that Anakin was coming to save them, to protect them, and then he draws the lightsaber on them. I mean, it was traumatic, to see through her eyes what she experienced, and then to see, and then the reveal of what Obi-Wan kind of pieced together is, you're not really here just for me. You're here for Anakin. I was like jaw dropping, like, yes, wow, amazing storytelling, amazing, plot twist kind of, it was fantastic.
She didn't. He says, "How could you know?" He says, "Vader would have kept that hidden."
Yes.
You wouldn't have told anybody that he was Anakin Skywalker. How did you know? And then he pieced it together. We see the flashback, Tom, of Order 66 again, and instantly in my brain I thought, okay, this is why there's the warning. At the time of this recording, whenever Mason has watched Revenge of the Sith, he's actually only seen it once, and I believe he was 7 or 6. And I had him close his eyes for that part because I didn't want him to have to put that in his brain when he's 6 years old. So that was as new to him as it was, to anyone who had seen any Star Wars for the first time. And it's very powerful. I want to talk more about it. Smooth already had some beautiful insights, but I want to see what you think about it too, Tom.
Yeah, this part of the story really made me like it helped me to connect with Reva.
Yes.
And I felt so sad for her because her rage and her anger, I was like you're misguided. And your rage is at the wrong person, because it finally gets to, because I still was like, why is she so angry at Obi-Wan? If Anakin's the one that murdered the younglings and she witnessed that, why is she on his side? But she comes out with it because she goes through the grief of it. She says, I thought they were there to help, as you said, Smooth. And she then kind of blames herself and says, I was too weak. And then she says, I played dead. Again, a sign of weakness and in this tragedy and this horror. And she says, they were my only family, which resonated with me because Obi-Wan had just shared with us that they, in talking to Leia, that the Jedi were his only family. He has these fleeting moments of maybe a brother or something. And so I'm getting the connection here. And she says he slaughtered them. And this is where it was. And I was like, no, because she says, where were you?
Yeah.
And of course, they're talking through a wall, which is symbolically the divide, like is a divider between the two of them.
Nice.
Protection a little bit for, but it allows them to talk, but it's definitely like this division. And she says, where were you? Why didn't you stop him? And I was like, no, like I wanted Obi-Wan so bad to say, I was fighting a war. I was fighting Grievous. I wanted him to go through all that, but it wouldn't have made any difference at this point. And you mean she was too far gone, and it just really made me feel bad for her. But it did help me to understand her rage a little bit. I did want to say one more thing about Reva regarding Vader, and I don't mean to to do this jump, but with the indoctrination of Grand Inquisitor, did that at all remind you of the scene when Palpatine makes him Darth Vader?
Oh, 100%.
He tells her, kneel.
Yeah.
You are now Grand Inquisitor. And he can't give her a lightsaber. And so, or, whatever. So he gives her the pin. I thought I didn't think anything of the pin, but Kaylee, my oldest daughter, was watching, and she goes, what's that? She called it out right at the beginning. Yeah. She's like, what's that? I said, it's the Inquisitor pin. She goes, we've never seen Inquisitor pin before. I'm like, just go with it, dude. Just be quiet. Anyway, I was like, I wonder if Vader, and this was before I realized what they had done to Reva. But at that moment, I was like, I wonder if Vader can see some of himself in her rage. And if he had a connection to her and that's why he was willing to give her this chance. I mean, we know differently now, but that's where my mind was at that time. So much, we learned so much about Reva in this episode. I loved that.
If there's anything that this series has shown us about Darth Vader, is he is that cruel, cold-blooded, calculating enemy that we've seen in the Kieran Gillen and Charles Soule comics. He is nasty and horrific. He definitely, like you said, we definitely see quickly there's zero empathy. There is zero compassion. He doesn't care.
And he's willing to be, exactly. I was going to say he uses somewhat of a long game here because he ultimately says he knew her intent the whole time, but he knew he could use her. And that's right. That scene helped me because at the very beginning, I think it was episode 1 or 2, where she says, "Oh, you didn't know Anakin is alive." I was like, "There's a 2?" Yeah. I was like, "How did she know?" Like immediately, I told Lauren, I was like, "Nobody's supposed to know that that's Anakin." So that was, I loved that we finally kind of understood it wasn't just a slip in storytelling. Like there was a real reason for that.
100%. And it also makes sense. And I alluded to this last week. It makes sense in part 4 why I thought that she was purposefully stalling, trying to get information from young Leia. Like it was very clear to me she didn't want to hurt a child because you do this to yourself. But she keeps delaying it and delaying it and delaying it. And now I see why. And I had a feeling we're going to get something. I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know how or why. But there was something there. And this is it. Yeah. She, it is so horrific when she says, I felt their bodies go cold.
Oh, my gosh.
Imagine the guilt, the anger, the aggression, the frustration, the hate that comes from that. That comes from a place of love. What is it like? What is it? I don't know what the exact quote, but it's something like hate or sin. Usually there's one misstep on the road to love and it leads to something like that. Yeah. And it's very evident here. Yeah. Very evident here. I was very moved by her story. And I think Obi-Wan was as well. And he doesn't officially say, all right, well, they don't officially agree to team up, but they do agree to team up because here comes some moments in storytelling that we will not soon forget. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Sith Lord, Darth Vader. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
We are back, and we've broken down a majority of part 5. There's some important themes there that I'm sure we'll be talking about for years and years to come. But now we need to talk about Darth Vader. Look, we love seeing Vader kind of come into his own in Rogue One. And when I say come to his own as far as earning that reputation that he has, we've seen him in Star Wars Rebels. But in this second half of Part 5, guys,
Wow.
it is a Vader unleashed. Look, let's talk, I guess, about... Well, let's just talk about the whole thing. What stands out? What are the key moments? We don't necessarily need to summarize them, but I think there's some really powerful, great stuff here that ties into the interludes that you refer. Was it interludes that you talked about? Is that the word you used?
Mm-hmm, it is.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah. Well, I think it doesn't all begin, but where it begins for me regarding Vader is when Reva says, just sort of in general, when Kenobi's shackled and on his knees before her, she says, "Inform Lord Vader, Kenobi is ours." If you go back through all of the stories and movies, anytime someone says "inform Lord Vader," it doesn't bode well for them. Think about Empire Strikes Back. So
Yeah.
Vader is coming. This is it. But she calls him. She says, "Inform Lord Vader," and when he makes the appearance on the planet, and he comes to her and says, "Where is he?" and she says, "I've got him locked inside." What does he say? He says, "I'll apprehend." It's not apprehend, but he says, "I'll take care of this myself."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, oh man. I mean, you can see it, and I go back to, like, is it Vader? Is it Anakin?
Yeah.
I feel like right now it's Anakin in Vader's uniform because of that. There's another note I wrote down here, and as I put the question: is Vader acting like Kylo Ren? Like, this is a young Vader. Right? It's pretty early in his Vaderisms, at least, as far as like a chasing
he's
down.
Probably 39. I think he's around 39 years old.
But I mean, like, as being Vader, though, like
yeah,
not Anakin,
it's just been Vader for 10 years.
So he's still like he's about to apprehend the one person he's been looking for 10 years. And I just feel like he's very reckless in the way he goes. I'll do it myself. And I walk in, and there's times with just his brashness, I'm like, man, these are the things that frustrated me about Kylo Ren early in the sequel trilogy. But he has pure power. He's brash. But I don't know how far you want me to go with this, because what I really want to talk about is his terror of tearing that ship apart, which was totally frightening. And all I could think of was, boy, did Han Solo and everybody get lucky on Hoth when that happened.
Yeah.
Then what I really want to, what I personally would like to talk about is what may be in my top 3 lightsaber battles.
Well, let's save that for a separate.
I'll save that. Yeah, let's talk about that later.
I want to weigh in on what you said just there. I didn't find Vader reckless at all, and I found him the opposite of reckless. I found him so arrogant and so angry and so like, I got this. Like, have you ever seen Fernando Tatis Jr. hit a home run before? I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's this like the strutting. I am so powerful in the Force. No one can mess with me. He thought that from early on in his life. And now he's finally get to see Obi-Wan Kenobi. He thinks he's got all these pieces in place. He's going to best his former master. He's toying with Reva the entire time, even though she doesn't know yet, and neither do we, as he's strolling through. I kept thinking, doesn't he know this is a trap? And then I'm like, of course he does. He doesn't care. He doesn't think any trap can stop him.
Yeah.
And that makes him even more frightening to me, because the way he just looks, that this costume is just so brilliant. I've always thought Darth Vader's costume was perfection. And the way that Hayden Christensen carries that role and carries that weight and strolls through that base was just so good. So good. Smooth, anything you want to say about that? Because I would definitely want to talk about the lightsaber duel itself too. But yeah, the stuff with the ship flying away, because I first thought,
my goodness,
oh no.
Yeah.
And Mason and I look at each other, and he slowly brings it down. And he rips out part of it just because he can. Like he did that because he could. And then you see the one fly away, and all of a sudden you connect the dots of, oh, okay, Obi-Wan outsmarted it. Yeah. He told us he was going to do that. Anakin, we see this time and time again. Talent is great, but yes, not only do you have to outthink your opponent, but you have to not underestimate your opponent. And often when we're super talented and you're a little bit, sometimes when you're not as mature in certain ways in your life, you're going to underestimate. And he underestimates Obi-Wan yet again. And look what happens. And it was a breathtaking, thrilling moment. We'd never seen anything like that in live action. You've seen it in the Force Unleashed video games and things like that, but never in Star Wars live action. And it was absolutely tremendous.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One thing that kept coming back to me was that interlude about how I wrote the quote down about Obi-Wan told Anakin that your need for victory blinds you, and that's how he's, Obi-Wan is discussing the issue with Anakin, with Reva. He's like, I don't need to be the one to do this. He'll be focused on me. I'm bringing him to you. So then, all he'll see is me. You can, strike at that moment. But we also see that the quote play out, your need for victory blinds you, in this whole thing, this pride. I love how he never runs. He always just walks with purpose through this things. Yeah. He sees Obi-Wan's not where he's supposed to be. So he's just, walking through to then see the ship about to take off. And then when he grabs it, I think we all were like, whoa, like almost like get off the couch. Like, are you kidding me? And just rips it apart. And then, he has, obviously Obi-Wan had that was just for distraction. Yeah, it was brilliant.
Insanely brilliant.
It was great juxtaposition. I love that use of the interlude on that one, because he snatches victory from Vader, blindly, as he says in the quote, but he does it too, in both times as a Padawan and now as a Sith Lord.
Epic. All right, well then let's talk about the duel. Let's talk. Is it if it's fair to call it a duel? Go ahead, Tom. You wanted to talk about it earlier. Kick it off for us.
Do I? I think the most significant thing here is Vader never draws his own weapon. That is absolutely amazing. And what great, I'm not sure what the word is, but it's like showmanship. What direction? I'm just going to go direction, where she starts with a lightsaber and he rebuffs everything, not with another lightsaber, not with a weapon, but solely with the Force. Just like Obi-Wan says moments earlier, there are other ways to fight. So Vader did learn some things from Obi-Wan, but also he wants to show his might.
Oh, yeah.
And he establishes himself as he is the boss. But it's such a beautiful fight. He is like, when you take two magnets and you try to, and they're at the opposing sides and they keep moving away from each other, because that's what this was like. Every time she swung, he just pushes it away with the Force. And I was like, man, he's like got a magnetic field around him by using the Force. But then he steals her lightsaber away from her and splits it in two. Now, that is intentional, by the way. The Hasbro action figure shows that is intended to be, it can be two blades. But he takes them, and how cool was that to see him holding two red blades? Yeah. And he does it not once, but twice, because it gives it to her, lets her fight with it, steals it back from her again. I'm just like, you're right. Maybe calling it a duel is giving too much credit to the battle and shows just either how dominant he was, or how weak she is, and maybe it's somewhere in the middle there. But just his brute force. And as I sat there watching it, all I could think was, this is why this leads directly to the Rogue One sequence. What I just witnessed, how he treats his Grand Inquisitor, but one of his people, one of his own, it sets up what we're going to see in Rogue One. His viciousness, his frustration continues to build. And so I just think it's a magnificent battle. Even though he completely dominates it, he dominates it with like this Sith beauty.
Yeah.
Well said. Smooth, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you see him looking off as the spaceship takes off, and Reva kind of hesitates a little bit. But even if she didn't, she had no chance in this battle. I mean, from the first stroke, wasn't even able to complete it. He stops it with his back turned, and then he turns around and block with the Force, which is just magnificent. I mean, to see it, like you said, in live action like that is just. It's incredible to be a part of, to witness, and you wonder. I mean, obviously, to get to where she is, she has to have skill, and skill with the Force, skill with the saber, and so I think it just epitomizes, how powerful Anakin is, with the Force, and why he can be, I guess, arrogant to the point where he walks and never runs to these battles and stuff, but to his detriment, unfortunately. But yeah, and then when he has the double lightsabers, definitely call back to the Count Dooku scene with Dooku kneeling. I thought we're going to see one of those again, but a little bit different. But still, sad for Reva. Like you said, you kind of had this compassion for her once you heard her story. And could understand her rage, but anger and anger, that doesn't mix well.
No, it really is. You nailed it too, both of you. The fact that he never even thinks about. I mean, it's basically the equivalency of when you see like those old movies or old stuff where a kid is running at a bully, or a big brother is like putting his hand out and putting it on a little kid's forehead, and they're running towards him. They can't reach him. They can't hit him or punch him or anything. That's what he does. He is so dismissive of her. He manipulated her and he used her for. He says he knew her from the beginning. So imagine knowing that, like, I murdered all your friends, and I'm going to let you hang out with me for, 20 years or however long 10 years, and think you have a chance against me. The reveal that she is only doing this because she was using Obi-Wan as bait to get to Vader and to distract Vader is such a brilliant masterstroke in storytelling. But here we see that it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't think anyone would really believe that she had any kind of a chance against him at all. But she didn't. I mean, we know that Inquisitors are not Sith. And we know that Inquisitors are tough. But the reason their lightsabers do those little spins and those tricks is because they're not good enough without that. They can't take on a Jedi necessarily one-on-one without these little tricks and cheats. Even the Grand Inquisitor himself. When Vader slows that thing down, it's almost like her heart beating up at the same time, because we know what he's doing. And the fact that he just uses the Force to deflect all of her attacks with grace, and he's just so dismissive. I should probably get a thesaurus as an English teacher, but that's really what he is. And then when he uses her lightsaber and then he gives her own back, like, yeah, sure, let's try it. It's so rude and just brash and just deliciously evil.
Yeah.
It's from a fictional perspective. Like you said, this is if we do a top 5 duels, Tom, like, this is going to be hard to keep this one out. Because it's just so one-sided and such a display of power and confidence and talk about, we talked earlier about how Vader / Anakin always dismisses his opponents. Yeah. He's really doing it here, and you can see why, because he is that good. Yeah. But one thing through the interview that you keep bringing up, Tom, which I appreciate you doing that, where I got to talk with Hayden, and he says he thinks of them as the same person. I never thought that. And I thought, well, even when he told me that, I'm thinking, okay, I can see that, and I'm sure there's parts of the story I just don't know or whatever. But maybe he just feels a connection that I could never possibly understand because I'm not an actor. I haven't played Anakin Skywalker or Darth Vader in any way, shape, or form, besides with an action figure or at home with my kids. But now, to me, I don't know if I'm going to look at Darth Vader the same again. I've said that throughout the series. But no, he is Anakin. He knows what he's doing. Yeah, he's angry. Yeah, he's sad. Yeah, he's frustrated. But no, he's just a jerk. He is mean. And I never fully saw Vader that way besides stuff in comics. And now, it's sort of put an asterisk in my brain of him. Is he my favorite Star Wars character? Now, I don't know if I can say that anymore. I'm not sad about that. I'm not sad about that because I love the great thing about stories, and the thing that drew me to education and being a teacher anyway, is I love when stories make me think and make me look at the world differently than I have before. So the fact that it's doing this with such panache and style and wizardry and stunt work is just an absolute. It's like Thanksgiving fandom feast for Dan Zehr, and I love it. I love it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Amazing. I mean, it was just incredible. The action sequences that are provided, and then we see the reveal with the Grand Inquisitor back. Like that's another one. It's like we were wondering because obviously we saw him in Rebels. Like is that was that a different guy then? So that was another surprise reveal.
I want to talk about. I definitely want to talk about that. But go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Yeah, and so that was just really a twist that I didn't see coming. I wonder if we'll ever know, what happened, how they got him back. But and then
I think we do know actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Okay, I was just saying this the twist of the knife there at the end. We had Vader almost mocking her and how he toyed with her at the end, and then the Grand Inquisitor comes out, kneels down, and says, how revenge is I don't know, I didn't write the quote down, but it's like it inspired him to come back. This whole revenge to get her, but then he takes the pin away from her and says, as if you were ever worthy of this. Just like poor Reva.
I know.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
So, I mean, he says that, you back, we're going to put you back where you belong in the filth or whatever. I can't remember exactly the line,
gutter,
but in the gutter. I mean, how much lower could Reva feel at this point? She's laying there on the ground with this mortal wound, and the guy that she thought she had dispatched with is back, and all of that. It's just, oh my goodness. I mean, I guess if you want to say she gets a glimmer of hope, it's that, she's going to get a tidbit of information from the carelessness of the comm that Anakin or Obi-Wan had entrusted in I can't remember his name, but back to the Inquisitor. When he walked out, my daughter goes, "Oh God, I can't stand that guy."
Oh no.
Which I think is great, because then in just a few moments after that, she says, I just want to watch all of the movies again. She goes, "This story is so good." And Dan,
Wow.
Kaylee, and how I feel like she's been sort of losing the way. I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I wanted this series to do, is make fans, myself included, people like my daughter, to have faith in Star Wars and rejuvenate that feeling we have when we first watch A New Hope or whatever the first movie was for anybody, that this brings, this is the center, because Obi-Wan Kenobi is so important in my mind about what this whole, it's not the whole story, but he's such an important piece of it.
Yeah.
That and when the Grand Inquisitor came back out, wow. I mean, so I'm dying to know what your theory is, Dan, on how do we know that we should have seen that he was coming back? Because I was with you, Smooth. I was like, what?
I knew he had to, because he's the one that, 4 years before A New Hope, which is 6 years after this story,
Yeah,
is the one who fights Kanan and Ezra.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And it's the same guy. I didn't know how, but he tells us, and Mason and I had an interesting conversation about this. Revenge is a great motivator. We know the Sith use anger to try to stave off death. And that's what Darth Maul did. That's what Maul did on that garbage planet. That is what we've seen through a lot of different things. So that's what kept Vader alive. I mean, anyone else would have died on Mustafar. Vader didn't die. He was angry, and plus he had some instant help, but that anger kept him alive to that moment and that pain. So to me, unless they pulled some trickery or slay of hand on that planet, which the name is escaping me, then no, I just got mad enough. And then Mason says to me, "Look at Darth Vader, Dad. He's all mechanical, and he was cut up and wounded really bad. Why couldn't they have done that to the Inquisitor to heal him?" And I thought, you know what? That combined with the anger thing, that makes perfect sense to me. And maybe we'll see more about that, or maybe it doesn't even matter. But I think it's very likely that those things combined worked out, and he got his Grand Inquisitor Chick-fil-A badge back, which I thought was great too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was super cool. But let's talk about the end. Bail says, I know it was a risk to communicate with you, to reach out to you. They're really sloppy, and there's this wonderful ending. And as if the whole episode wasn't tense and stress filled enough, then you see a shot of Luke laying down asleep, and the camera zooms in on him, which is a great way to direct that sequence. And the camera work is really smart. The vulnerability of Luke Skywalker, even though we know Luke's going to be just fine, it's frightening. It is absolutely frightening. A terrific ending to a spectacular episode. And Reva isn't even dead. I mean, the Inquisitor and Vader are so dismissive of her that even when she's not dead, they don't care. In fact, I feel confident that Darth Vader probably is thinking, "Yeah, come get me later. Good luck, kid. You're not even worth my time. I'm not even going to kill you. You don't even deserve that. I like you to be really mad. I really like you to feel defeated." We've seen that. He does let Obi-Wan Kenobi go in part 3, and now we see very clearly he didn't have to do that. He let him go. He wants to mess with your mind. That, ladies and gentlemen, that is the influence of Sheev Palpatine at work.
Yeah, that's a really good connection. Yeah, I wasn't sure if the Inquisitor was a different, because if that was like a race that he came from that looked like that, and maybe that was a different Inquisitor. But yeah, that makes sense if that's the same guy, that he'd have to come back. And I guess what was going on in my mind when at the end, when she's still alive and she gets a communicator, is that both Anakin and the Grand Inquisitor both came back from a quote mortal wound to come back and haunt their enemy. Like, you think they would learn the lesson here? Like, why don't they just finish the job? But maybe it is that pride thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's pure arrogance.
Yeah.
So do you guys want to say anything about the ending with Luke or anything else before we wrap this up? This has been a wonderful discussion about a terrific episode.
I was just gonna, what I was gonna say is about the same as you, as the tension that they build there, that zooming in, and it's a great sequence because you go to the homestead, then you go a little closer, then you see Luke, and then it's a pan in, and just, oh boy, I really thought we were gonna see some red in the background or something. I'm like, dude, this cannot possibly be. But we didn't. But still, that almost is worse because it just you have that tension, and you just wonder, can Obi-Wan get back in time? That's where I am right now. Can he get back in time to? I mean, again, we know the answer to that, but it's the answer of how does he do that?
Yeah.
And so I thought it was an unexpected ending to this episode. And boy, I just can't wait for the next episode. Holy cow.
Yeah, I thought it was incredible. I think the one thing I was going to just really quickly go back on was one of the quotes that stood out to me in the interlude where Obi-Wan finally said at the end, he's like, "Anakin, you're a great warrior, but you need but your need to prove yourself is your undoing. Until you overcome it, a Padawan you'll still be. I think that stood out to me as an important line, because when we see him in A New Hope, finally he says that line, like, I am not the learner, I'm finally the master. It's like,
When I let you, I was but the learner.
yeah. So maybe he still feels that way because of these failings that he's had in this series. But then, yeah, I mean, to end it back on Tatooine, I thought that was brilliant. To kind of bring young Luke into this series, and again, it just kind of, the tension continues, and you wonder, just as every episode has, like, how can they end this? Only 6 episode series. So we'll see. It's been amazing, and incredible ride, and I think they've earned our trust to finish it strong.
I don't think we could end on a better statement than that. Well, Smooth, terrific job. I knew you would bring your A game, and you were tremendous. Thanks so much for being on Coffee with Kenobi. Yeah. I hope you'll come back sometime.
I appreciate it. It was just an honor to be a guest, and absolutely, I'd love to.
And I know you have a very low-key presence on social media, but is it fair to say that people can reach out to you in the CWK Cafe?
That's exactly where I would be. If you need any questions or comments, you'll find me there.
Love it. And Tom, what about you, buddy? I think I know the answer, but let's just remind our friends anyway.
Okay, sure. On Twitter, you can reach out to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on Kenobi, on Reva, Vader, even Tala. We didn't talk a whole lot about Tala, but
we didn't. And her sacrifice. You know what?
Oh man,
let's do that real quick. Let's do that.
Can we? Because if you don't mind, that was going to be my final thought.
Please,
so
please.
I'll just say what I had on my mind about her is, because it was such an emotional conclusion to her sacrifice when she pulls out the thermal detonator, and Obi-Wan screams, and all I could think of was, why am I so invested in this character? I really haven't seen a ton about her, except this. And this is where the storytelling across platforms comes into play, because we understand her sacrifice through Rebels, through Bad Batch, through Rogue One, the soon-to-be Andor. I mean, so we know who Tala is. Not Tala as a character, but we know who she is and what she stands for. And we know how important those people are to the rebellion. So when you lose someone like her, and I mean, we see her at her best when she's playing the Imperial spy, and then she turns it, and she's really good at what she does. She is a major loss to, and it's not quite the rebellion yet, but she's a major loss to that movement going forward. And so it's so emotional, but we didn't have to have a ton about her, because we quote know who she is, which is, again, magnificent storytelling that threads through this era.
She's one of my more favorite characters in Star Wars, and the actor's name is escaping me, so I apologize for that. But she's just a masterclass in perseverance, dropping some sage wisdom to Obi-Wan Kenobi repeatedly, and the fact that we hurt when she's gone just shows how much of an impact she had on all of us.
Yeah, and the way that they did it, again, the cinematography and the directing, I mean, to pull in like her droid, who was, you could tell they had a special bond and long standing relationship, working together, to have the droid as her shield to give her those last few moments. And again, kind of going back to what we said about her influence with Obi-Wan, as far as, fight to make it better. This also, I feel like, was really something that probably had stayed with Obi-Wan through the rest of his years, the sacrifice that she made, and he was right there to witness it. And just like in Rogue One, as other ones, like you said, Tom, it really this makes it feel, we feel the cost of the war, we feel the cost of the rebellion, and what it really and how deep it really was.
Absolutely. So Tom, thank you for reminding us to tell her, because she definitely deserves to do. We could do an entire show on her. Sure. But go ahead.
Right. So reach out to me on those on Twitter at Draftline, DRAFTLINE. And if you'd like to hear of a different sort of heroes, villains, and adventure, join me on Teachers in the Dungeon, the podcast that I co-host. Catch that on any of the podcast areas, but we are out there on Twitter at Dungeon Teachers.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Zehr, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
That's going to do it for this week's episode of Coffee with Kenobi. I want to thank Smooth Rivera and Tom Gross for joining me, and all of you for being a part of this Star Wars conversation. MEI and Mouse Fan Travel is your no-cost, no-obligation, quote, place to go at coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan-travel. They can help you plan your magical vacation, whether it's on a Star Wars or Disney-related thing like the Galactic Star Cruiser, Galaxy's Edge, the theme parks, the cruise lines, Star Wars Celebration next year in London, or anywhere else you want to go. It doesn't have to be a theme park. You can go anywhere, Europe, overseas, anywhere in the States. You name it, MEI and Mouse Fan Travel can help you. Plus, you can help support me and Coffee with Kenobi in the process. CWK Live is every Monday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time at coffeewithkenobi.com/live or facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi. Our Coffee with Kenobi Facebook group is the CWK Cafe at coffeewithkenobi.com/community. There you can go for Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler, and drama-free place. Coffee with Kenobi is possible because of the members of the CWK Alliance. Thanks to you, the podcast, Facebook Live, event coverage, and so much more comes to life. Find out how you can help this show for as little as $1 a month by joining the CWK Alliance, and you'll receive access to CWK Pour-Over, an exclusive weekly audio and video podcast not heard anywhere else. coffeewithkenobi.com/support or coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance is where you can become a member. And 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital. Coffeewithkenobi.com is the website for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. You can email me, Dan Z, at coffeewithkenobi.com. Connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zehr, MRZEHR, on Instagram at Dan Zehr CWK, or on LinkedIn. You can find Coffee with Kenobi all over social media, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok. Give the show a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, or subscribe to Coffee with Kenobi's YouTube channel. Please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. If you like the new Coffee with Kenobi logo, go to our shop at coffeewithkenobi.com/shop for t-shirts, hoodies, laptop covers, phone cases, all kinds of cool stuff. If you are starting a podcast or a blog or want to expand your existing brand, danzmedia.com is where you can go to sign up and have me help you. I'm available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization, talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. And if you're in the Central Illinois area this Saturday on June 18th, from 4:30 to 5, I will have a book talk and author Q&A signing for Star Wars I Am Your Father, Lessons for Parents, Protectors, and Mentors. Then from 5 o'clock to 5:45, I will have the book signing, and then at 6 o'clock, A New Hope will be playing on the big screen. There will be a limited number of books available for purchase at the socially distanced event. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We've only got one more episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi left. I'm really looking forward to that and to breaking it down with all of you. So get your top 5 ready for part 5. If you want to be a part of the conversation, here's some immediate feedback from me on your comments, opinions, and reviews of part 5 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Until next time, have a great weekend. And remember, this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.